I'm Jen Moore, the program annotator for Music of the Baroque. We launched Baroque Notes, our virtual pre-concert lecture series, as a companion to last year's virtual performances. The response was extremely positive. As we start the 21-22 season under the new circumstances of the pandemic and the new health and safety requirements that are necessitated, I am grateful that we can continue to offer you pre-concert lectures safely and also in a way that allows you to watch at your convenience, which is something that many of you expressed to me personally was helpful. Thank you so much for joining me in this endeavor. Thank you also for joining Music of the Baroque for the first concert in the 51st season, Baroque Fireworks. Dame Jane Glover leads the orchestra in two of Handel's great ceremonial works for outdoors, one of the three water music suites, and the music for the royal fireworks. We'll also hear one of his concertos a due cori, or concertos for two choirs, which offer a fun opportunity to play Name That Oratorio tune. And three great trumpet players, longtime co-principal Barbara Butler, Taga Larson from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and Channing Philbrick, recently retired from the Lyric Opera Orchestra, will be highlighted in Telemann's Concerto for Three Trumpets. But first, we will hear Chicago composer Stacy Garrop's brand new Baroque-inspired work, Spectacle of Light, which came into being as a commission for our 50th anniversary. What I'd like to focus on in this short talk is the connection between music and the purpose for which it was composed. Baroque composers were often not writing out of artistic inspiration, but rather out of a vocational need that helped shape the composition. This is true even with the first work on Baroque fireworks, which was written just last year by Chicago composer Stacy Garrop. We asked Stacy to write a Baroque-inspired fanfare in honor of our 50th anniversary, and the work was to receive its premiere as part of the huge celebration we planned for our 2021 season. Spectacle of Light finally received its world premiere on September 10th at Baroque in the Park. I asked Stacy to talk about the creative process behind Spectacle of Light, and she shared with me how the work came to be after she accepted the commission.
Hi, my name is Stacy Garrop and I am the composer of Spectacle of Light. This was my first commission for a Baroque orchestra piece, and I was so excited to have a chance to write for something like this. As a modern day composer, I don't get a lot of opportunities or offers to write for Baroque orchestra, so this was really quite a special thing for me. When I began doing the research for this piece, I went to the Music of the Baroque's webpage and saw this beautiful etching of a fireworks show. And with a little sleuthing, it turns out that that etching is from the 1749 event that honored King George II when he signed the treaty to end the War of Austrian Succession the year before. So, as was typical for leaders back in that time period, he wanted to celebrate with a big display of power, and that involved music and fireworks. And if you think about it, to command fire in the night sky was a big deal back then because they didn't have any electricity. When night fell, that was kind of it. People were in the dark, except for candles, until the next day. So the other thing that's very notable about that particular event is that Handel wrote his music for the royal fireworks for the same thing, and it premiered at that event. So after studying a lot of pictures, I then took my research online to study actual fireworks shows. So I went to YouTube and I watched a lot of fireworks shows there, including some really cool drones that are flying in among the fireworks up in the sky. So that helped me really think about how does music relate to fireworks, and I realized that they're both very ephemeral. They're there for a moment, you get to enjoy it, and then they just poof, they go into your memory. They're fine memories. So when I began composing my piece, I thought about the course of a fireworks show. And my piece starts off with silence and anticipation, and then one little firework goes up into the air and explodes. And then music goes back to a little bit more anticipation, and then it builds up to the first big volley of fireworks. So after that, if you think about a fireworks show, we then tend to have a lull in the middle where we get to see one beautiful firework or a flower or maybe a happy face, something that really is a contrast to the big moment. So in that moment in my piece, I chose to introduce two short quotes from Handel's Music for the Royal Fireworks. So you're going to hear those, and then that's followed by more anticipation and another big build-up to get to the big final volley of sound and light and all that excitement. But then when I get to the end of the piece, I wanted to do something a little special. So one thing I do is I draw out one of the Handel quotes a little bit longer, but I also end the piece on what in musical geeky terms we would call a dominant chord. And what this means is that the piece ends without concluding. It feels incomplete. And I engineered it that way because I wanted the whole piece to basically feel like you're anticipating what's going to come on the concert. I wanted it to build suspense for what we're going to hear for the rest of the evening. So I have had a blast working on Spectacle of Light, and I'm very much looking forward to working with Jane Glover and the musicians on putting this together, and I'll see you in the concert hall.
The fact that Stacy was composing for music of the Baroque very much shaped her musical choices, and Handel was similarly focused when he composed the water music. In September 1714, Georg Ludwig, the Elector of Hanover, arrived in London to become the King of England. He became known almost immediately for his love of music and his love of parties, and he completely embraced the English tradition of concerts on the Thames. A crucial artery for commerce in the heart of London, the river had long functioned as a stage for numerous royal and civic spectacles, events in which music almost always played a vital part. It was for one such occasion in 1717 that Handel composed at least part of the water music. By all accounts, it was a rousing success, as one of the guests later reported. The music had been composed specially by the famous Handel, a native of Halle, and His Majesty's principal court composer. His Majesty approved of it so greatly that he caused it to be repeated 3 times in all, although each performance lasted an hour, namely twice before and once after supper. The weather in the evening was all that could be desired for the festivity. The number of barges, and above all of boats filled with people desirous of hearing, was beyond counting. Handel had a decided acoustic challenge when writing the water music, and his solution is very much present in the music. The first and second showcase loud instruments that particularly suit the challenging outdoor acoustic. Suite number 1 in F major is written for 2 oboes, bassoon, 2 horns, strings, and basso continuo, an accompaniment with keyboard and bass instruments, while Suite number 2 in D major adds 2 trumpets to the above ensemble. Suite number 3 in G major, however, uses instruments that are significantly softer, recorder, flute, strings, and continuo, leading some scholars to conclude that the work may have been played at the dinner following the voyage, rather than on the river itself. Jane Glover has chosen the second suite for Baroque fireworks, and the prominence of loud brass instruments is very much present from the start. Let's listen to a little of the opening allegro. Handel created the Concerto a Due Cori, a work for 2 choirs of woodwinds and brass, oboes, bassoons, and horns, and strings, for an entirely different purpose. He wanted to spice up his oratorio performances and probably promote his other productions. The first of Handel's Concerti a Due Cori, HWV 332, probably had its premiere in a 1748 production of the oratorio Joshua, but the work functions as a lively advertisement for several of his works in the genre. Perhaps the most memorable of these moments takes place in the second movement. sounds a lot like this bit from a little work called Messiah. The occasion for which Handel's music for the royal fireworks was composed is literally written in the title, and the work shows off English pomp and circumstance to the fullest. Commissioned for a celebration of the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, it served as the accompaniment for the evening's primary spectacle, a grand display of fireworks in Green Park. Artisans and pyrotechnicians were summoned from all over Europe, and an immense Doric-style edifice was constructed to serve as a stage for the display. Complete with steps, pillars, and passageways, the 410-foot building boasted images of Greek gods, a bas-relief of King George II, and a 200-foot pole bearing an allegorical representation of the sun. According to Gentleman's Magazine, the overblown architectural trappings matched the size of the crowd perfectly. The 12,000 onlookers who attended a public rehearsal, quote, occasioned such a stoppage on London Bridge that no carriage could pass for 3 hours, end quote. Despite the music's success, its composition wasn't without controversy. George II initially resisted the idea of music altogether, finally agreeing only on the grounds that it would be martial music with no fiddles. Handel had other ideas, however. As the Duke of Montagu anxiously reported to the Events Impresario, Handel proposes to lessen the number of trumpets, etc., and to have violins. I don't at all doubt, but when the king hears it, he will be very much displeased. In the first version, the wishes of the king prevailed. The work is originally scored for martial instruments alone: 24 oboes, 12 bassoons, 2 contrabassoons, 2 cornets, 9 trumpets, 9 horns, 3 timpani, and 2 side drums. The notoriously stubborn composer refused to abandon his own desires completely, however, rescoring the piece in the orchestral version, most well known today, for a benefit concert later in the year. Let's listen to one of the dance movements, which directly alludes to the event for which the work was composed, La Réjouissance, also rejoicing. The king's martial music is very much in evidence, while Handel's elegant strings contrast nicely. The first performance of music for the royal fireworks ended in chaos. The pyrotechnics set off several fires, the temple constructed for the occasion burned to the ground, and swords were apparently drawn among the event's organizers. Our Baroque fireworks will be infinitely safer, but musically just as dramatic. Thanks for joining me for Baroque Notes, and I am so looking forward to saying hello in person at Baroque Fireworks this Sunday, September 19th, 3 o'clock p.m. at the North Shore Center in Skokie, and Monday, September 20th, 7:30 p.m. at the Harris Theater for Music and Dance in Chicago. And I will see you at the concerts.